In 1901, a man stood up at a dinner party in New York, and he talked for 90 minutes.
Just 90 minutes.
Right, 90 minutes. And he had no money to invest. He had no formal authority over the people in the room either.
None at all.
And he was speaking to the most ruthless, financial titans on earth, guys like J.P. Morgan.
The absolute giants of the era.
Exactly. But by the time he sat down, he had literally manifested $400 million out of thin air.
It's insane to think about.
It is.
Yeah.
How did he do it? Because he understood a psychological architecture that 99% of people never learn. So welcome to this deep dive.
It's genuinely one of the greatest stories of pure, unadulterated execution in the history of business, and it perfectly encapsulates what we're unpacking today.
Yeah, today we are exploring the invisible scaffolding of massive, staggering success. Usually when we talk about building something, there's a physical blueprint.
Right, like a house.
Yeah, like a house. You pour the concrete, you frame the walls, put on the roof. Everyone can see exactly how the materials come together to create the structure. Wood, nails, glass.
It's just physics. Physics and geometry.
Exactly. But when you step into the world of human achievement, that physical blueprint just vanishes. We're looking at a construction site that is completely invisible.
Completely. And we like things to be concrete, It's safe, it's predictable.
It is. But we are going to decode exactly how that invisible construction works today. We have this fascinating foundational philosophy in front of us, derived from studying over 500 of the wealthiest and most successful individuals in history.
Which is an incredible sample size, by the way.
It really is. It was a project originally initiated by Napoleon Hill and Andrew Carnegie. So we're digging into the raw mechanics of achievement here.
And it's probably important to acknowledge right away that exploring this philosophy means navigating some incredibly dense early 20th century terminology.
Oh, definitely.
We are talking about concepts that were formulated 100 years ago, so the language is, well, it's thick.
Very thick. So to set the mission for our deep dive today, you're going to hear some psychological jargon, words like autosuggestion or synthetic imagination and transmutation.
It sounds a bit like a 1930s science fiction novel, honestly.
It really does. But our job today is to translate that. We're going to strip away the antiquated language, explain the actual psychological mechanisms, the how and the why these things work, and use relatable, everyday analogies to make these profound insights instantly applicable to your life right now.
Because while the language might be dated, the underlying human psychology is completely unchanged. The hardware of the human brain operates the exact same way today as it did a century ago.
Whether you're aiming for financial wealth, or planning a massive career pivot, or just trying to rewire your own mental default settings, these principles form the underlying code.
They absolutely do.
So let's start at the absolute genesis. The way this whole framework came to be is almost mythical. It begins with an encounter between two men in an office, and a challenge that fundamentally altered how we understand success.
The sheer scale of this origin story is staggering. You have Andrew Carnegie, who was the great steel industrialist of the era, arguably one of the richest human beings to ever walk the planet.
Just unimaginably wealthy.
Right. And sitting across from him is a young, relatively unknown journalist.
A guy just looking for an interview, basically.
Exactly, just doing a profile. But Carnegie had a very specific obsession. He understood the mechanics of how he built his own empire, but he was frustrated because he believed that the actual formula for success was entirely absent from the traditional education system.
He thought schools were failing.
Yeah, he felt that schools were teaching compliance and rote memorization, which, well, that was completely disconnected from the realities of wealth creation and profound human achievement. He wanted this philosophy codified.
So he essentially issues a massive, life-altering dare to this young journalist.
He does. Carnegie looks at him and asks, "Are you willing to spend the next 20 years of your life without a single dime of pay from me, by the way, studying the greatest minds of our time, to extract this secret and organize it into a philosophy for the world?"
Just pause and imagine that for a second. Being asked to dedicate 2 decades of your life to a research project with absolutely zero guaranteed paycheck.
Based purely on a billionaire's hypothesis.
Right. It requires an insane level of conviction. But he said yes.
He did. And true to his word, Carnegie opened the doors. He provided personal introductions to the absolute giants of the era. Thomas Edison, Henry Ford, Alexander Graham Bell.
Mount Rushmore of innovation.
Exactly. And over the next 25 years, this project analyzed over 500 ultra-successful people to isolate the exact common denominators of their achievements.
And what they found, the foundational premise that everything else we're going to talk about today rests upon, is that every fortune, every world-changing invention, every massive empire begins as an abstract thought.
Yes. Thoughts are literally the blueprint of reality.
But there's a massive caveat here. It's not just a passing thought. It's not a fleeting daydream while you're staring out the window at work. It has to be backed by a burning, obsessive desire.
That's the key.
And there's a historical story here that illustrates this perfectly. It's the story of Edwin C. Barnes.
Oh, Edwin C. Barnes is the ultimate embodiment of this inciting idea. If you want to understand what a burning desire actually looks like in practice, you look at Barnes.
Walk us through the Barnes story, because the sensory details of what this guy actually did are just incredible.
So Barnes had one singular obsessive thought. He wanted to go into business with Thomas Edison. And we need to be very precise with the language here. He didn't want to work for Edison.
Right, he didn't want a job.
He didn't want a job. He wanted to be a partner with Edison. Now, Barnes faced two insurmountable problems for a normal person. First, he didn't know Edison. They had never met. He had no mutual connections, no introduction.
Nothing. And second, he was completely broke. I mean, he didn't even have the pocket change for a train ticket to get to Edison's laboratory in Orange, New Jersey.
Exactly. So what does a person with a mild desire do? They say, oh, well, maybe someday, and they get a local job.
Right. They settle.
But what does a person with a burning desire do? Barnes literally sneaks onto a freight train. He rides in a blind baggage car, rattling across the country, covered in coal dust and soot, traveling like a hobo just to get to New Jersey.
Think about the physical toll of that. The noise, the cold, the sheer desperation of sneaking onto a freight train.
It's brutal.
And then he arrives. He walks into Thomas Edison's laboratory, this immaculate buzzing hub of the world's greatest inventions, and he stands in front of the great inventor. And Barnes looks terrible. He looks like an absolute tramp, a vagabond off the street.
He looked like a tramp, but his psychology was entirely different. Edison later recounted that meeting. He noted that despite the ragged clothes and the dirt on his face, there was something in Barnes's expression, an absolute, unyielding determination that commanded immediate respect. Yeah, Edison, who had met thousands of people, realized instantly that this man standing in front of him was fully prepared to stay there until he got what he wanted.
Edison famously observed that when a man desires a thing so deeply that he is willing to stake his entire future on a single turn of the wheel in order to get it, he is practically guaranteed to win.
And he did win, eventually.
But not right away, right?
Hmm.
Edison gives him a shot, but it's not a partnership. He gives him a menial, low-level job, basically sweeping floors and doing grunt work around the lab.
Now, a crucial psychological mechanism is at play here. How does a floor sweeper actually become a business partner? For months, nothing outward changed. Barnes was just doing grunt work. He wasn't making deals.
Just pushing a broom.
Exactly. But internally, in his own mind, the thought was intensifying. While to all the other employees, Barnes was just another guy pushing a broom, in his own mental framework, he was already Edison a partner.
He was just waiting for the physical reality to catch up to his psychological reality. And here's where it gets so fascinating. Because the opportunity finally presents itself, but it comes heavily disguised as a problem.
It usually does.
Edison had invented a new machine. It was called the Edison dictating machine, which was later known as the Ediphone. Essentially, it was an early voice recorder for office dictation.
Right.
But Edison's own sales force absolutely hated it. They looked at this clunky piece of machinery and told Edison, "This is impossible to sell. No businessman wants this."
The experts saw guaranteed failure, but Barnes saw his opening. He recognized that this was the exact moment his mental blueprint could be overlaid onto physical reality.
So what does he do?
He marched into Edison's office and confidently stated, "I can sell this machine," and Edison let him try.
And he didn't just sell a few of them. He sold it so successfully, with such relentless energy, that Edison eventually awarded him the exclusive nationwide contract to distribute and market the machine.
He manifested his partnership.
He really did. The slogan literally became, "Made by Edison, installed by Barnes." He started on the floor of a dirty freight train and ended up making millions of dollars, simply because he refused to accept any other outcome.
He completely altered his reality.
But I want to pause here and push back on this because a skeptical listener is going to hear this and think, wait, isn't this just wishing really hard?
Yeah.
What actually separates this from just daydreaming about being rich and hoping it happens? Because millions of people wish for money and they die broke.
That is the vital distinction. Wishing is entirely passive. Daydreaming is passive. The psychological difference between wishing and what Barnes did is a concept known as burning your ships.
All right, let me offer an analogy here.
Hmm?
It's a difference between a thermometer and a thermostat.
I like this.
A thermometer is passive, right? It just hangs on the wall and reflects the temperature of the room. It reacts to its environment. Most people operate like thermometers. If the economy is bad, they feel bad. If they get a low-paying job, they adopt a low-status mindset.
They just reflect what's around them.
Exactly. A thermostat, on the other hand, actively changes the environment. You set it to a specific degree, and the machine exerts force until the room matches the setting. Barnes was a thermostat.
He absolutely was.
But tell us about the burning ships metaphor, because it perfectly explains how you become a thermostat.
The metaphor comes from a historical account of a great military commander who was about to lead his army into battle against an enemy that vastly outnumbered them. He sailed his troops across the sea to the enemy shores.
Okay.
They unloaded the soldiers, the weapons, and the supplies. And then the commander gave a shocking order. He told his men to burn all of their own ships.
Imagine standing on the beach watching your only ride home go up in flames.
Exactly. He addressed his men as the ships burned and said, "You see the boats going up in smoke. That means we cannot leave these shores alive unless we win. We now have no choice, we win, or we perish."
And they won.
And they won. The psychology there is profound.
It really is.
It is entirely about removing the safety net. When the human brain knows there is a comfortable retreat, a fallback plan, a quiet way to quit it will inevitably take that route when the pain of effort gets too high.
Because the brain seeks comfort.
Always. By physically or mentally removing any possibility of retreat, you trigger a primal, survival-level mechanism in the brain. You awaken a level of desire and creative problem-solving that simply cannot be accessed when things are comfortable.
There's a much more modern example of this principle involving Marshall Field, the legendary retailer. This one really hits home because it deals with literal ashes.
Yes, the Great Chicago Fire. A massive section of the city, including the entire retail district, was completely decimated, reduced to smoldering ruins.
It's gone overnight.
The morning after the fire, the city's merchants gathered on State Street. They were standing there, smelling the smoke, looking at the charred remains of their livelihoods, and they held a meeting to decide what to do.
And what was the consensus?
The vast majority decided it was hopeless. The environment had defeated them. They agreed to pack up whatever they had left, abandon Chicago, and try to rebuild in other easier parts of the country.
They were looking for the unburned ships. They wanted a retreat.
Precisely. But Marshall Field was standing in that exact same circle. He smelled the exact same smoke. He lost just as much as they did.
But his internal thermostat was set differently. Field looked at those ashes, pointed his finger at the ruins of his own store, and declared to the fleeing merchants, "Gentlemen, on this very spot, I will build the world's greatest store, no matter how many times it may burn down."
He absolutely refused to leave.
He burned his ships mentally, and he stayed, and he built Marshall Field and Company, which became a staggering retail empire.
The difference between Field and the merchants who ran away is the exact same difference between Barnes and the other floor sweepers in Edison's lab. It is an unyielding, obsessive desire backed by an absolute, terrifying refusal to retreat.
So what does this mean for you, the listener? It means that if desire is the foundation of the architecture we're building, it can't be a casual desire. It has to be a desire that deliberately cuts off all your own escape route,
It has to be absolute.
but that naturally leads to a massive, painful question.
Okay.
Let's say you have the burning desire. You've mentally burned your boats. What happens when that desire hits a massive, seemingly insurmountable roadblock?
Because it will.
Right. Because let's be real, the universe doesn't just hand you millions of dollars or a dream career just because you want it really badly and you refuse to quit. You are going to hit a wall.
And that brings us to the tragedy of stopping too soon. The philosophy we are studying introduces a critical psychological trap that destroys almost everyone, and that is the illusion of failure.
The illusion of failure.
Yeah. The fundamental premise here is that temporary defeat is almost universally mistaken for permanent failure.
The human brain experiences a setback, feels the pain of that setback, and incorrectly labels it as a final destination.
Precisely. And there is a story that illustrates this so vividly, it's almost heartbreaking. It's the story of the R.U. Darby gold mine. Let's walk through this because it is an absolute masterclass in the cognitive danger of quitting when you're in the pain cave.
Set the scene for us.
So this takes place during the gold rush. R.U. Darby's uncle catches the gold bug. He is consumed by the idea of striking it rich, so he heads out west to Colorado to dig. He stakes a claim, grabs a pick and shovel, and goes to work.
It's grueling, brutal physical labor.
And backbreaking. But eventually his effort pays off. He strikes a vein of shining gold ore.
But finding the gold and extracting the gold are two very different things.
Right. To get the ore out in any profitable quantity, he realizes he needs heavy, expensive mining machinery. So he quietly covers up the mine to hide his discovery, and he travels all the way back home to Maryland.
To get funding.
Exactly. He gathers his relatives and his neighbors, including his nephew Darby, and pitches them on the mine. He convinces them to pool their life savings to buy this expensive machinery.
They raise the capital, they buy the drills, and they ship it all out west. Darby and his uncle head back to the claim, set up the machinery, and go to work.
And at first, it's a massive success. The first carload of ore they extract and ship to a smelter confirms their wildest dreams they have tapped into one of the richest mines in Colorado.
Incredible.
The math is clear. A few more carloads will clear all their debts, and then the massive, life-changing profits will start rolling in. Down go the drills, up go their hopes. They are practically measuring the drapes for their mansions.
And then the absolute worst-case scenario happens. The vein of gold just disappears. One day it's there, the next foot of dirt they drill, it's just plain rock.
The pot of gold at the end of the rainbow just vanished. They were devastated, but they kept drilling, desperately trying to pick up the vein again. They drilled day after day, sinking more time and energy into the rock, but they found absolutely nothing.
Just dead rock.
Dead rock. Finally, exhausted, completely demoralized, and deeply in debt, they decided to quit.
They hit a temporary defeat, experienced the profound emotional pain of that defeat, and let their brains label it as permanent failure. They built a raft and sailed away from the burned ships.
Exactly. So they do what defeated people do. They sell all of that incredibly expensive mining machinery to a local junk dealer for a few $100s, literally pennies on the dollar, and they take the train back home in absolute disgrace, having lost their family's money.
It's crushing.
Now, here's where the story pivots on a psychological level. Most junk dealers will just take the machinery, melt down the metal, and sell it for scrap. But this specific junk dealer had a different mental framework. He didn't just accept Darby's failure as an objective truth.
He understood the value of specialized knowledge. He called in an expert.
He hired a mining engineer to come out to the abandoned mine and examine the rock formations. The engineer didn't just look at the dirt. He calculated the fault lines. And the engineer reported back to the junk dealer with a staggering conclusion.
What was it?
He said the project failed because the Darbys were not familiar with fault lines. The vein hadn't disappeared forever. It had just shifted. And the engineer calculated that the vein of gold would be found exactly 3 feet from where the Darbys had stopped drilling.
3 feet.
3 feet. The junk dealer went down exactly 3 feet, found the vein, and extracted millions of dollars in gold. Simply because he understood a foundational rule: before you accept failure as a permanent reality, you consult an expert.
Imagine the psychological torment of being Darby. You spend years paying back the money you borrowed from your friends and neighbors, carrying that shame, only to find out later that you were literally 3 feet away from unimaginable wealth.
It would destroy most people.
It would make them bitter for life. But Darby actually did something remarkable with that massive failure. He transmuted it.
He did. Darby eventually moved into a completely different industry. He entered the life insurance business, and he took the visceral pain of that gold mine lesson with him.
He used it.
Yeah, he made a vow to himself. He said, "I stopped 3 feet from gold, but I will never ever stop because a prospect says no when I ask him to buy insurance." He used the memory of his biggest failure as the fuel for his persistence.
And the result.
He became one of the rare few individuals of his era who sold over $1 million in life insurance annually. He re-architected his brain to understand that no is rarely a final answer. It's usually just a temporary fault line.
To reinforce this idea of unyielding persistence, there's another story from Darby's life that we have to talk about. And this one isn't about business. It's a deeply visceral, intense observation about human willpower. It's the story of the sharecropper's daughter.
It's an incredibly raw anecdote. Darby was visiting his uncle, the same uncle from the gold mine. Now, we need to understand who this uncle was. He ran a large farm, and he was a fierce, temperamental, highly intimidating man.
Not someone you crossed.
Not at all. While Darby was there, they were in an old mill on the property. A small child, the daughter of one of the tenant farmers, a sharecropper, walked into the mill and quietly stood by the door.
Just a tiny kid.
Right. The uncle looks up from his work, sees her standing there, and angrily yells, "What do you want?" And the little girl says, "My mammy says to send her 50 cents.
The uncle roars back, "I'll not do it. Now run on home." But the little girl just stands her ground. She'd say, "Yes, sir," but she doesn't move a single inch.
The uncle goes back to work, grumbling, completely ignoring her, assuming he terrified her, and she left. He turns around a few minutes later, and she is still standing there in the exact same spot.
Now he genuinely loses his temper.
He yells at her again to leave immediately, or he's going to take a switch to her.
The girl says, "Yes, sir," and again remains completely, defyingly motionless.
Now, the uncle is absolutely furious.
Yeah.
His authority is being challenged by a child. He drops what he's doing, picks up a barrel stave, a heavy, curved piece of wood, and starts marching toward this little girl with an expression of pure rage.
Darby, watching this unfold, literally holds his breath. He thinks he's about to witness a tragedy. This massive, angry man bearing down on a tiny, defenseless child with a weapon.
But when he gets right up to her, looming over her, the little girl doesn't flinch. She takes one deliberate step forward, looks him dead in the eye, and screams at the absolute top of her lungs, "My mammy's got to have that 50 cents.
And the uncle completely freezes. The psychological dynamic flips in a millisecond. He stops dead in his tracks.
He stares at the girl for a long minute, mesmerized by her intensity. Then he slowly drops the heavy piece of wood, reaches into his pocket, pulls out a $50, and hands it to her.
And she takes the money and slowly backs away, never taking her eyes off him until she is out the door. Darby and his uncle are left standing in the dusty mill, completely stunned.
This terrifying, authoritarian man had been completely subdued by a child.
It's wild. I love trying to explain this using physics. I compare the little girl's mindset to gravity. Gravity doesn't shout. It doesn't flex its muscles. It doesn't try to intimidate you. It doesn't negotiate.
Right, it just is.
Exactly. It is a quiet, immovable force that eventually bends all matter and light around it. That little girl had a definite purpose. She had mentally burned her ships. She absolutely refused to accept any outcome in the universe other than walking out of that mill with 50 cents.
She lacked physical strength, she lacked social status, but she possessed an unshakable will.
And that leads us perfectly into the actual practical mechanics of this philosophy. Because here's the critical question. If a quiet, immovable force can conquer brute strength, if desire and persistence can literally bend reality like gravity, how does a normal person actually program their own brain to possess that kind of willpower?
Because, let's be honest, we aren't just born with the obsessive drive of Edwin Barnes or that little girl.
Exactly. You don't just wake up one day and decide to have an unshakable will. It requires rewiring the hardware. Which brings us to the jargon. We need to decode a term that this philosophy relies on heavily, which is autosuggestion. Now, when a modern listener hears autosuggestion, it sounds like stage hypnosis. It sounds like someone swinging a pocket watch and telling you you're getting sleepy. What exactly is the psychological mechanism here?
It is absolutely crucial to strip the mysticism away from this term. Autosuggestion simply means self-programming or self-conditioning. The foundational model here posits that your mind is divided into two parts: the conscious, logical mind, and the subconscious mind.
Okay.
The conscious mind acts as a guard at the gate. It filters the information coming in from your five senses. It analyzes, it doubts, it uses logic.
It's the part of the brain that says, I have $20 in my bank account, therefore I am poor.
Right. But the subconscious mind operates entirely differently. It is like a massive, incredibly fertile garden.
Yeah.
And here's the terrifying part. The subconscious garden does not care what kind of seeds you plant in it.
It'll grow anything.
It will grow poisonous weeds just as aggressively and efficiently as it will grow beautiful roses.
It is completely morally neutral.
Exactly. It just acts on whatever is fed into it most consistently. Autosuggestion is simply the communication bridge between your conscious mind and your subconscious mind. It is the deliberate, intentional act of repeatedly feeding specific thoughts, desires, and commands past the logical guard at the gate and planting them deep in the subconscious soil.
I think the most accurate modern analogy for the subconscious mind is a smartphone algorithm. Think about the feed on TikTok or Instagram.
Oh, that's a good one.
The algorithm itself is a completely neutral piece of code. It doesn't care if a video is inspiring and good for your mental health or if it's toxic political outrage that ruins your day. If you hover for 3 seconds on a video of people complaining or a video of failure, the algorithm mathematically says, oh, they are paying attention to this, serve them 10 more videos just like it.
And suddenly, your entire reality is a constant stream of negativity.
That is exactly the feedback loop. But if you deliberately hijack that algorithm, if you intentionally search for success stories, educational content, and positivity, the algorithm adjusts. It starts serving you opportunities to learn and grow.
That's autosuggestion.
Yeah, autosuggestion is you acting as the engineer of your own mental algorithm. You aggressively focus on your definite purpose, so your subconscious starts scanning the environment, serving you ideas, plans, and opportunities that you previously would have ignored.
Biologically, we call this the reticular activating system, or the RAS. It's the part of your brain that filters out the millions of data points you see every day and only shows you what it thinks is important.
Exactly. If you decide to buy a red car, suddenly you see red cars everywhere. They were always there, but your RAS was filtering them out. Autosuggestion programs the RAS to spot wealth and opportunity.
But there is a critical missing ingredient that causes most people to fail at this.
What is it?
A lot of people hear about positive affirmations, they stand in front of their bathroom mirror, and they dryly recite, I am wealthy, I am successful, and absolutely nothing changes in their lives.
Because the conscious mind just rolls its eyes and rejects it as a lie.
Precisely. The cognitive dissonance is too loud. The subconscious mind only responds to thoughts that are heavily mixed with intense emotion and belief. If you just recite empty words, your subconscious ignores them.
So emotion is the key.
The philosophy points out that faith, love, and enthusiasm are the most powerful positive emotions to mix with your thoughts, while fear is the most powerful negative emotion. You have to literally induce the emotional state of already possessing the thing you desire.
Okay, so how do we actually execute this? The philosophy doesn't leave this as abstract theory. It provides 6 exact, practical steps to turn an abstract desire into physical reality using autosuggestion. Let's really analyze these 6 steps, because this is the core operational manual.
Okay, step 1. Fix the exact amount of money, or the exact success metric you desire in your mind. Being vague is fatal. You can't just say, I want to be rich, or I want plenty of money.
Why is that? Why does it have to be exact?
Because the brain is a targeting system. If I tell you to go find a car in a parking lot, you'll wander around aimlessly. But if I tell you to find a red 2018 Honda Civic with a dented bumper, your visual cortex instantly filters out everything else.
That makes sense.
The exact number gives the subconscious algorithm a precise target to optimize for.
Make it measurable. Got it. Step 2, determine exactly what you intend to give in return for this money. The philosophy is brutally honest here. There is no such reality as something for nothing.
No free lunches.
You can't just wish for $1 million to fall from the sky.
Yeah.
Are you giving your time? Are you providing a specific service? Are you inventing a product? You have to define the exact value you are injecting into the marketplace to justify the return.
Step 3. Establish a definite date when you intend to possess the money. A goal without a deadline is just a wish. The deadline creates a psychological friction. It forces urgency. It tells the brain, this isn't a someday project. This requires immediate creative energy.
Step 4, create a definite plan for carrying out your desire. Begin at once, whether you feel ready or not, to put this plan into action. This is where 90% of people fail.
They wait for the perfect moment.
They wait until they have all the skills, all the funding, the perfect website. The philosophy says start right now with whatever broken tool you have. Action generates momentum, and momentum generates clarity.
Step 5, write out a clear, concise statement of the above. Put the exact amount, the time limit, what you will give in return, and the plan into a single written paragraph. This is about physical manifestation. The act of writing takes an electrical impulse in your brain and forces it into the physical, tactile world.
And finally, step 6, read this written statement aloud, twice daily. Once just before going to sleep at night, and once after waking up in the morning. And as you read it, you must see, feel, and believe yourself already in possession of the goal.
That specific timing in step 6 is the secret to autosuggestion. Why right before sleep and right after waking? Because that is when you are in a hypnagogic state. Your brain waves are slowing down into alpha and theta states.
The guard at the gate is asleep.
Exactly. The logical, cynical guard at the gate of your conscious mind is groggy and off-duty. That is the moment you can slip the new programming directly into the subconscious algorithm without it being rejected by logic.
Okay, I have to jump in here with the hardest question. How do you genuinely feel and believe you have something that you clearly, physically do not have?
It's tough.
If you are living paycheck to paycheck and your bank account is negative, how do you trick your brain into feeling wealthy without just feeling like a delusional person lying to yourself? The cognitive dissonance must be deafening.
It's the most difficult hurdle in the entire framework. And the philosophy acknowledges this friction. It says that developing this level of belief requires a profound chemical change in the brain, a state of mind that it refers to as faith.
Let's clarify this immediately, because words carry baggage. When this philosophy talks about faith, it is not talking about a religious or theological concept, right?
Not at all. It is talking about a state of mental chemistry. Faith, in this context, is absolute self-reliance and unshakable belief in the attainment of your definite purpose. It's a state of mind that is induced through the repetition of instructions to the subconscious mind.
It's when your brain stops hoping it will happen and accepts it as a foregone conclusion.
Exactly.
And when a human mind reaches that specific state of absolute faith, the concept of the impossible simply ceases to exist in their reality. The text illustrates this with an incredible story about Henry Ford and the V8 engine. It shows what happens when faith collides with established expertise.
The V8 engine story perfectly demonstrates how faith alters reality. Henry Ford, at the height of his power, decided he wanted to build a motor with 8 cylinders cast in one single solid block.
Okay.
Now, from an engineering standpoint at the time, this was completely unheard of. It defied the known laws of metallurgy and casting. He called in his top engineers, explained his vision, and told them to produce a prototype.
And the engineers, the men with the actual specialized degrees, looked at him like he was a madman. They uniformly declared, "Mr. Ford, it is impossible. You cannot cast an 8-cylinder block in one piece. The metal will warp, it will crack, it cannot be done."
And Ford, operating from a state of absolute faith in his desire, simply replied, "Produce it anyway."
Just like that.
The engineers reiterated that it was physically impossible. Ford said, "Go ahead and stay on the job until you succeed, no matter how much time is required."
So the engineers go to work, because Ford is the boss and he's signing their checks. 6 months go by. They try every technique known to science. Nothing. Another 6 months go by. Still nothing.
They're hitting a wall.
They have exhausted every avenue, and they report back to Ford that it is definitively, objectively impossible.
And what does Ford do? He doesn't compromise. He doesn't say, "Okay, let's do a 6-cylinder." He says, "Keep trying. I want it, and I'll have it." He absolutely refused to accept their reality.
His internal faith in the idea was stronger than their collective expertise.
And eventually, after forcing them to keep pushing the boundaries of what was known, the impossible suddenly gave way. A new technique was discovered, and the V8 engine block was successfully cast in one piece. Ford's unyielding faith quite literally forced innovation into existence.
That's a great example of faith in manufacturing. But there is another story about faith here that is deeply personal, highly emotional, and frankly, requires us to really analyze what is going on psychologically. It's the story of Napoleon Hill's own son, Blair. Let's spend some time on this because it pushes the concept of belief to its absolute extreme limits.
This story is remarkable. Hill's son was born without any physical signs of ears. When the doctors examined the infant, they delivered a devastating, definitive diagnosis. The child had no physical hearing organs whatsoever.
Just none.
He was completely deaf, he would never be able to hear, and consequently, he would never learn to speak. He was scientifically destined to be a deaf-mute for life.
But Hill, armed with his own philosophy of burning desire and faith, completely and utterly rejected the doctor's biological diagnosis. He writes that in his own mind he challenged the doctor's opinion. He secretly made a vow that his son would hear and speak.
He essentially waged a psychological war against biological reality. He writes that he knew where there is a desire, there is a way. He refused to let the boy learn sign language. He refused to send him to a specialized school for the deaf.
Which is very controversial.
Oh, highly controversial. He insisted that the boy be integrated and treated as completely normal.
And he used autosuggestion relentlessly on the child. As the boy grew, Hill constantly implanted the belief in his son's mind that his disability was actually a secret advantage. He told him that nature had given him this unique challenge so he could overcome it and achieve something great. He framed the deafness not as a deficit, but as a unique asset.
Over the years, they discovered the boy had a tiny, slight degree of hearing via bone conduction. If you spoke loudly against his skull, he could register vibration. Hill used this tiny sliver of hope to constantly feed positive reinforcement into the boy's mind.
Building that belief.
Right. He built the boy's confidence to incredible heights. The boy started selling newspapers on the street, becoming totally self-reliant, negotiating with people, despite being legally deaf.
And the culmination of this lifelong psychological conditioning is incredible. When the son was in college, he came across a new experimental electrical hearing aid. Now, because his father had implanted such intense faith in him that he would one day hear, because he had been primed to expect a solution, he didn't hesitate to try it.
He was ready for it.
He put the device on, and for the first time in his life, the technology bridged the biological gap. He heard perfectly.
But the story doesn't end just with him hearing. Because he had been taught his whole life that his disability was an advantage, he didn't just celebrate his new hearing and go live a quiet life. He analyzed the experience, reached out to the manufacturer of the experimental hearing aid, and ended up going to work for them.
Oh, wow.
He dedicated his life to taking this technology to other deaf people. He turned his greatest biological weakness into his life's purpose and a highly successful career.
Okay, hold on. I have to step in here. We have to ground this, because a modern listener is going to hear faith-cured deafness and immediately tune out, thinking this is snake oil or magical thinking. Biological barriers don't just vanish because you think really hard. You don't grow eardrums through autosuggestion.
That is a very important distinction to make, and you're right, taking it literally is dangerous.
What the philosophy is really highlighting here isn't medical magic. It's the psychological concept of self-efficacy and priming. Hill couldn't magically cure the deafness, but by refusing to let his son adopt a victim mindset, by constantly telling him a solution would appear, Hill ensured that when a technological solution, the new hearing aid, finally did appear, his son was psychologically primed to seize it.
Exactly. A person crushed by a victim mindset might have rejected the experimental tech or been too afraid to fail to even try it.
Hill engineered his son's psychology so that he was ready to capitalize on the opportunity the second it manifested.
That is exactly the right lens to view it through. Faith didn't rewrite the boy's DNA. Faith optimized his psychology to exploit a technological breakthrough.
It's a profound lesson in framing your disadvantages. It forces you to ask, what artificial barriers are you accepting as hard facts in your own life? What limits have you accepted about your career, your intelligence, your background that are just illusions waiting to be shattered by a change in framing?
It's a powerful provocation. But we also have to recognize the limits of belief alone. Belief and faith are the fuel of the engine. But a car with a full tank of high-octane fuel and no steering wheel isn't going to get you where you want to go.
It's just going to crash at a higher speed.
Exactly. You need direction. You need a map.
And that direction comes from knowledge. Which brings us to the debate between specialized versus general knowledge and the mechanics of what is called the mastermind.
This is where the philosophy directly attacks the conventional education system. It debunks a massive societal myth that we all grew up hearing, probably from our teachers, which is knowledge is power.
Right. We've all heard that.
The philosophy clarifies this emphatically. Knowledge on its own is absolutely not power. It is only potential power. It only becomes actual power when it is organized into a definite plan of action and directed toward a definite end.
Think about it. Our universities are full of brilliant professors who have immense encyclopedic general knowledge but very little wealth. Why? Because they haven't organized that knowledge into a specific actionable plan for wealth accumulation or business creation.
They have a massive database but no execution software.
The perfect historical anecdote to illustrate this distinction is the Henry Ford libel trial. It is a brilliant display of practical intelligence versus academic intelligence.
Oh, this is a classic. Set the scene for us in the courtroom.
During World War I, a Chicago newspaper published a scathing editorial calling Henry Ford an ignorant pacifist. Ford, who was immensely powerful and highly protective of his reputation, was deeply offended. So he sued the newspaper for libel.
Okay.
The case went to court. The newspaper's defense strategy was simple truth as an absolute defense against libel. They wanted to prove to the jury that Ford was, in fact, literally ignorant.
Because Ford famously only had a few months of formal elementary schooling. He wasn't classically educated.
Right. So the opposing lawyers put Ford on the witness stand, and they start peppering him with obscure, general trivia questions. They asked him things like, who was Benedict Arnold? And how many soldiers did the British send over to America to put down the rebellion of 1776?
They were trying to publicly humiliate him.
Exactly. To make him look like a foolish, uneducated mechanic who just got lucky.
And Ford sits there taking this barrage of trivia until he finally gets tired of the charade. He leans forward in the witness box, points his finger at the lawyer, and delivers an absolute mic drop.
What does he say?
He says, in effect, if I should really want to answer the foolish question you have just asked, or any of the other questions you've been asking me, let me remind you that I have a row of electric push buttons on my desk. By pushing the right button, I can summon to my aid men who can answer any question I desire to ask concerning the business to which I am devoting most of my efforts. Yeah, and then he says now, will you kindly tell me, why should I clutter up my mind with general knowledge for the purpose of being able to answer questions when I have men around me who can supply any knowledge I require?
It's brilliant. He completely reframed the definition of intelligence. I compare this to modern computing. People who think they need to know every fact are like someone trying to download and store the entire internet on their local hard drive.
It's impossible.
It's inefficient, it slows the system down, and it's ultimately impossible. Ford realized you don't need to store every file in your own brain. You just need a really fast, reliable internet connection to the cloud. And in his case, the cloud was his carefully curated network of experts.
And that network of experts is what the philosophy terms a mastermind. We need to decode this jargon because mastermind gets thrown around a lot today in the context of expensive retreats or online courses. A true mastermind is not a mystical seance, and it's not a networking mixer.
What is it then?
It is a coordinated alliance of two or more minds working in perfect harmony toward a single definite objective.
You don't need to be the smartest person in the room. In fact, if you are, you're in the wrong room. You just need to be the person who organizes the smart people and points their collective specialized knowledge in the same direction.
Andrew Carnegie himself admitted he knew almost nothing about the technical, chemical aspects of manufacturing steel. He didn't know how to operate the blast furnaces. He didn't need to.
Right. He hired the people who did.
He organized a mastermind group of master chemists, engineers, and plant managers who did. Carnegie's highly specialized knowledge was in his ability to organize people and capital.
We see this exact principle in modern titans. Look at Bill Gates. He famously dropped out of Harvard, the absolute pinnacle of general classical education, because he recognized he needed hyper-specialized knowledge in software programming to capture the impending microcomputer revolution. General knowledge was actually slowing him down.
And look at Ray Kroc with McDonald's. Kroc didn't invent the hamburger. He didn't even invent the fast food process. He was a guy selling milkshake machines. But when he walked into the McDonald Brothers restaurant in San Bernardino, he observed their highly specialized, hyper-efficient assembly line system for making food. His specialized knowledge wasn't cooking. It was recognizing the scalable value of that system and organizing the mastermind of franchisees, real estate experts, and operators required to duplicate it globally.
So if we trace the blueprint, so far you have the burning desire, you've altered your brain chemistry to achieve faith through autosuggestion, you've acquired the specialized knowledge, and you've built your mastermind team. But there's a missing link. Where do the actual billion-dollar ideas come from? How do you generate the spark that ignites all that potential energy?
That spark is generated in what the philosophy calls the workshop of the mind, which is the imagination.
Let's break this down, because the philosophy is very precise. It doesn't just treat imagination as a monolithic thing. It breaks it down into two distinct mechanical faculties, synthetic imagination and creative imagination. Let's demystify these. First, synthetic imagination.
Synthetic imagination is the faculty that rearranges old concepts, old ideas, or old plans into new combinations. This faculty creates nothing fundamentally new. It merely works with the existing material of experience, education, and observation that it is fed. It synthesizes.
Right.
It is the faculty most commonly used by inventors and business builders.
To put it in modern terms, synthetic imagination is like a DJ. The DJ doesn't invent the bass line. They don't invent the snare drum or record the original vocal track. The DJ takes existing, separate pieces of music, chops them up, and synthesizes them into a completely new combination to create a massive club anthem. The elements are old, but the combination is a new, highly valuable product.
That's a perfect analogy. And then on the other end of the spectrum, there is creative imagination. This is the faculty through which sudden hunches and spontaneous inspirations are received. It is how completely new, unprecedented ideas are passed into the human mind. The philosophy argues that this faculty connects directly to what it calls infinite intelligence.
Sticking with the music analogy, if synthetic imagination is the DJ remixing a track, creative imagination is like Mozart. Mozart isn't sampling. He is hearing a completely original, transcendent symphony in his head that has never existed anywhere in the universe before, and he is bringing it into reality. It's pure creation.
While creative imagination is responsible for paradigm-shifting leaps in humanity, the truth is that most massive fortunes are built primarily using synthetic imagination, taking existing elements, observing a friction point in the market, and reorganizing those elements powerfully.
And the philosophy gives a fantastic example of this, right?
The story of the $500 kettle.
This is the birth of Coca-Cola. It is the ultimate story of synthetic imagination. Tell the listener how this empire actually started.
An old, tired country doctor rode his horse into town and went through the back door of a local drugstore. He spent over an hour intensely negotiating with a young, ambitious clerk behind the counter. Finally, the clerk agreed to hand over his entire life savings, $500, which was a fortune at the time, to the doctor. In exchange, the doctor gave him 3 physical items: an old brass kettle, a wooden paddle for stirring, and a small scrap of paper with a secret formula written on it.
The doctor essentially sold his life's work for $500, hopped on his horse, and rode out of town. He probably thought he pulled one over on the kid. He walked away, thrilled with his cash.
But the clerk, whose name was Asa Candler, had something the old doctor severely lacked. He had an active, highly tuned synthetic imagination. Candler took that brass kettle and that piece of paper, and he synthesized it with a new element. He added one missing ingredient.
What was it?
Historically, we know he took the syrup formula and mixed it with carbonated water, but more importantly, he mixed it with a brilliant, unprecedented marketing strategy.
He synthesized the old medicinal formula with the new concept of a refreshing soda fountain drink. He didn't invent the syrup, but he imagined what it could become if presented differently. He turned that $500 investment into the sprawling global empire of Coca-Cola.
The power wasn't in the physical brass kettle, and it wasn't even entirely in the secret recipe. The power was in the organized idea generated by Candler's synthetic imagination.
And we can look at another staggering example of imagination turning into immense wealth. It's the story we teased at the very beginning of this deep dive, the birth of the United States Steel Corporation. This is the story of Charles Schwab and J.P. Morgan.
This is high-stakes, Gilded Age corporate drama. Set the scene for us at that dinner party.
It was December 12, 1900. Charles Schwab, who was Andrew Carnegie's brilliant young right-hand man, was invited to give a speech at a prestigious dinner at the University Club in New York. The guest list included the absolute biggest financial titans of the era, the men who controlled the nation's wealth, including the most powerful banker of them all, J.P. Morgan.
Now, at this time, the steel industry was a mess. It was highly fragmented, incredibly inefficient, and engaged in ruinous, cutthroat price wars.
Schwab stands up to give a speech. It was supposed to be a polite 15-minute toast, but he speaks for 90 minutes. And he uses his synthetic imagination to paint a vivid, logically unassailable picture of the future.
He didn't just stand up and complain about the current state of the industry. He used synthetic imagination to propose a completely new arrangement of the existing companies.
Right.
He painted a picture of a massive, unified, hyper-efficient steel monopoly. He explained how combining these warring factions into one giant trust could eliminate duplicate administration, lower costs, expand markets globally, and generate unprecedented wealth for everyone involved.
He made the abstract idea so clear, so compelling, and so mathematically sound that he completely mesmerized J.P. Morgan.
After the speech, Morgan pulls Schwab aside and they talk long into the night. Eventually, Morgan asks Schwab if he can actually get Carnegie to sell his massive steel empire so Morgan can build this vision. Schwab says yes, and they go on to negotiate a buyout price of roughly $400 million in 1901.
Schwab literally talked a billion-dollar industry into existence. He took an abstract idea, a synthetic imagination of combining smaller companies, and transmuted it into a physical reality, simply through the power of his organized plan and his unshakable belief in that vision.
So we clearly see the incredible power of imagination, but this raises a frustrating reality. Millions of people have great imaginations. Millions of people have million-dollar ideas while they're taking a shower or driving to work.
But very, very few of them build empires like Coca-Cola or U.S. Steel. What is the actual dividing line between the dreamer and the builder?
The dividing line is execution, and execution requires 2 twin pillars to hold it up. Which brings us to the final major mechanics of this philosophy: decision and persistence.
Let's start with decision. The philosophy reveals a startling statistic that really forces you to audit your own behavior. It says that after analyzing over 25,000 cases of men and women who had experienced profound failure, lack of decision or procrastination was the #1 cause of failure, near the very top of a list of 30 major causes.
It is the silent, insidious killer of dreams. Procrastination is just fear disguised as logic. The philosophy states a clear, unwavering rule. Successful people reach decisions quickly and change them very slowly, if at all. People who fail reach decisions very slowly and change them frequently and quickly.
Now, I have to play devil's advocate here. Isn't it incredibly dangerous to make snap decisions? Shouldn't we gather all the facts, ask for advice from our friends and family, and really weigh our options for weeks before we commit to a burning desire, especially if we're talking about leaving a job or starting a business?
The philosophy explicitly warns against exactly that instinct. It states, and this is a profound quote, "Opinions are the cheapest commodities on earth. Everyone has a flock of opinions ready to be wished upon anyone who will accept them. If you are influenced by opinions when you reach decisions, you will not succeed in any undertaking.
Right.
If you let your neighbors, your family, or the evening news do your thinking for you, you will have no desire of your own."
That is harsh, but it's profoundly true. It loops right back to the mastermind concept. You should only take counsel from the people you have carefully selected for your mastermind group, people who have specialized knowledge and share your definite purpose. You shouldn't take financial counsel from your broke uncle, and you shouldn't take business advice from a friend who has never taken a risk.
Exactly. Prompt decision requires courage. When Edwin Barnes jumped on that dirty freight train, it required a prompt decision and immense courage. He didn't poll his friends to see if it was a good idea. He just decided.
But making a quick, courageous decision is only half the battle, because the moment you make that decision, the universe is going to test you. You will hit friction. Which brings us to the second pillar, which is persistence.
The philosophy provides a beautiful metallurgical metaphor for this. It says that persistence is to the character of a person what carbon is to steel. It is the hardening agent. Iron on its own is brittle. Add carbon and it becomes unshakable steel. Persistence is the ultimate insurance against failure.
There are several modern stories that perfectly map onto this philosophy of persistence. Let's talk about the Steven Spielberg story, because his origin is the absolute definition of refusing to take no for an answer.
Spielberg knew from a very young age that his definite purpose was to be a film director. His target was set, but he was just a kid with a camera. He had no connections in Hollywood, no rich parents to fund him. So he took a public tour of Universal Studios on a tram.
Okay.
But he didn't just take the tour and go home wishing. He took action. He literally snuck off the tram. He hid between two sound stages until the security guards left for the day.
He squatted on the lot.
He came back the very next day, but this time he was wearing a suit and carrying a briefcase. He walked right past the guards with the absolute faith and posture of someone who belonged there. He found an empty office, put his own name on the door, and spent the entire summer networking with directors, writers, and editors on the lot.
He just acted like he belonged.
He persisted in building relationships and learning the craft, acting as if he was already employed there, until he finally managed to corner an executive and show him a short film. That persistence got him a contract, which eventually led to Jaws, and the rest is cinematic history.
He completely willed his career into existence through relentless persistence. Another incredible example of transmuting desire across multiple fields is Arnold Schwarzenegger. Talk about someone who used synthetic imagination and ironclad persistence to conquer completely unrelated industries.
Schwarzenegger's trajectory is phenomenal because it proves the formula is repeatable. He didn't just limit his imagination to one field. He started with a definite purpose to become the greatest bodybuilder in the world. He applied intense persistence in the gym, pushing past immense physical pain, and won Mr. Olympia multiple times.
Then he pivots.
Then he decided he wanted to be a leading man in Hollywood. And what happened? The cheap opinions flooded in. Agents and casting directors told him his Austrian accent was too thick, his name was too long and unpronounceable, and his body was too freakishly massive for movies.
They gave him all the logical reasons why he should accept permanent failure.
But he ignored them entirely. He applied the exact same formula of persistence he learned in the weight room to acting classes, dialect coaching, and networking. He systematically eliminated the barriers until he became the highest paid actor in Hollywood.
And then he does it again.
And then he synthesized his global fame and leadership skills, pivoted again, and successfully ran for governor of California. He just kept transferring his operating system of decision and persistence to larger and larger goals.
It's the exact same psychological architecture, just applied to different blueprints. The philosophy also plays out in the world of finance, specifically with a pioneer named John Templeton.
Yes, Templeton believed deeply in his specialized ability to pick undervalued stocks, but he had a definite purpose to help the average, everyday little guy invest like the wealthy. So he used synthetic imagination to pioneer the globally diversified mutual fund. He started with a tiny office and just a handful of investors.
He faced massive resistance, I'm sure.
He had to persist through terrifying economic downturns, world wars, and market panics. But he eventually built a $36 billion financial empire by persistently sticking to his value investing principles when everyone else in the market was panicking and changing their decisions.
Okay, we have covered an immense, almost overwhelming amount of ground today. Let's synthesize this entire deep dive for the listener. What is the overarching journey we've just mapped out from this philosophy?
If we assemble all the pieces, the blueprint is remarkably clear and ruthlessly logical. Everything, every fortune, every great achievement begins with a burning desire. A desire so intensely hot that you are willing to burn your boats and cut off all retreats.
Right.
You then intentionally program this desire into your subconscious mind through the daily emotional repetition of autosuggestion. Over time, this chemically alters your brain to produce unshakable faith, blinding you to the concept of the impossible. You then organize this desire by acquiring specialized knowledge and assembling a mastermind group to fill in your blind spots.
And then the imagination comes in.
You use your imagination to synthesize those resources into a definite plan. And finally, you execute that plan through lightning-fast decisions and an ironclad persistence that refuses to acknowledge failure as anything more than a temporary 3-foot delay.
It is quite literally an operating system for the human mind. But as we wrap up, we have to acknowledge that the philosophy warns of a final boss. There is a true enemy that can infect this operating system and crash the entire process before you even take step one.
The only real enemy in this entire framework is fear. And specifically, the philosophy points out that the fear of poverty is the most destructive, paralyzing force on earth. It describes the fear of poverty as a state of mind that paralyzes reason, destroys imagination, kills self-reliance, undermines enthusiasm, and discourages initiative.
It's a virus.
It is a virus. If your mental algorithm is operating from a fear of poverty, you cannot simultaneously operate from a faith in wealth and success. They are mutually exclusive frequencies. They cannot occupy the same space in your mind.
You have to choose which one you feed. Which brings me to a final provocative thought I want to leave you, the listener, with today. Think back to that analogy of the subconscious mind being like a neutral algorithm, or as the philosophy describes it, like incredibly fertile soil. The universe, your subconscious eyelid, is completely neutral.
Completely.
It will grow the beautiful, intricate seed of wealth, success, and happiness just as efficiently and ruthlessly as it will grow the poisonous weed of poverty, fear, and misery. It doesn't care if your thoughts are positive or negative. It simply manufactures physical reality out of whatever you focus on most intensely.
It acts as an obedient builder. It simply takes whatever blueprint you hand it and goes to work constructing it.
Exactly. So as you go about your day-to-day, as you drive to work, as you sit at your desk, I want you to actively observe the thoughts currently occupying your mind. Listen to the internal monologue you are having right now. And ask yourself this: if my brain is a 3D printer and is going to print a physical, real-world manifestation of whatever I am thinking about right in this exact moment, do I really want it printing this?
That is the question that changes everything.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.